something I like about considering myself as an Australian is that even though a lot of Australians consider themselves Western, I think we're actually here geographically in a very unique position in the world, in that we're not literally a Western country. We're a country whose main language of, commerce and education and so on, that's English. So we certainly inherit that from a colonial history, from a European colonial history. But at the same time, we're literally in the South Pacific. We're an island in the middle of the South Pacific. We have an Aboriginal history. We are multicultural. Our closest neighbors are, Pacific Islanders and Asians. I was born in Malaysia, and then I moved to Singapore when I was 3 years old. And then I grew up in Singapore until I was 18. And then I went to university in the US and lived there for about 5 years before I moved to Melbourne for 3 months, and then to Sydney for 3.5 years, and then back to Melbourne. So I've just arrived back in Melbourne. For a lot of people, citizenship is a birthright, and belonging to the land in which you are recognized as a citizen is this thing that is just a birthright, and it's normal, and it is taken for granted. And I have not really had that. So I grew up as a permanent resident in Singapore, and I never felt connected to being Singaporean, never. I would constantly assert my Malaysianness because it was really important to me to not forget where I was born and where my parents were born. My sense of self is partially reflected by my relationships with other people. Or if anything, my sense of self is nothing but what comes about as a result of relationships with other people, my environment, my history. There are elements of my experience which, if they go unrecognized, feel like something is shaken to my core. You're not recognizing that I come from overseas, or you're not recognizing that I am gay and that this is important to me and that this structures the way that I live in the world in a very specific way, or you're not recognizing certain elements that for the moment of this conversation with you are important to me. That feels like something has been hurt or something is compromised in that interaction. I'm tempted to say a lot of different things that have already been said, which include there's no one Australian identity, or Australia is a colonial country, or Australia has an Aboriginal heart, or Australia is an immigrant culture, and that is what Australian identity is. And all of these things are partial truths to me about what constitutes an Australian identity, to the extent that that even exists. I mean, outside of the notion of fluidity that we've just spoken about, because fluidity in identity is as true for individual people or individual persons as it is for a nation. I mean, maybe even more true for a nation, because for goodness sakes, you're incorporating, millions of individual stories. So how can there be one Australian identity? Colourfest is a manifestation of Australian identity. It is enabled by what we have available in Australia, be it a cultural environment where multiculturalism is valued, or access to like space where we can talk and where we will be listened to, or where films can be shown. Obviously, these things are available all around the world, but they're available in the specific ways that they're available and made available to us, and that also that we have accessed and intentionally accessed. And intentionally created together. We've created this world where this is possible, where Colourfest is possible. So to me, this is a manifestation of Australian identity.